University of Barcelona, who will talk about something super important that we kind of are missing sometimes, about ethics in VR. Michal? Hold on. Still, can you hear me? Well, okay, good. Yeah. Okay, so hello. In 2000, does it work? Yeah. In 2015, Chris Milk gave a TED talk where he called virtual reality the ultimate empathy machine, and he said VR is a machine, but through this machine we become more compassionate, we become more empathetic, and we become more connected, and ultimately we become more human. And to demonstrate the capabilities of VR, he released together with a startup called Within the 360-degree documentary Clouds over Sidra, which followed a young girl living in a refugee camp in Syria, and it was really a unique and moving experience, this ability that you can look around and essentially see what's going on behind the camera. This is something a normal TV documentary cannot give you. However, I don't think that it really utilizes the capabilities of VR in the right way. I mean, in the end, 360-degree video is still quite limited. You can look around, you can turn your head, but you cannot grab something, you cannot walk through the environment, and mostly it's just in 2D, it's not stereoscopic 3D. So in the end, you are still a passive observer and kind of detached from the content. And when there's one thing that I learned in the years I'm working with VR, then you never want to be detached from the virtual world, but you want the opposite. You want to get immersed and feel present in there. Finally, I think one of the approaches that has more potential than 360-degree video comes from limitation from head-mounted displays. So when you put on a head-mounted display, there's one thing, it covers your whole visual field. I mean, that's the point of it. You want to create a new world, but as a side effect, we cannot see our body, which makes interactions difficult, and also like shared virtual environments wouldn't be possible if you cannot see the other person. Yeah, this limitation is actually not just a limitation, it's actually a feature because we can change our bodies. We can be anyone, and also we can embody completely different kinds of living. Or I was once in a VR chat walking around as a dollar note, so I was like this, walking around. It was super interesting, everything was huge. This is something that we cannot easily do without VR. Yeah, to apply a body in virtual reality, there's a procedure called virtual embodiment. So what you need is, of course, tracking. You need to know how the person moves, and you need an avatar. And then you just put them in a virtual environment and ask them to look around, look at themselves, look into the mirror to see that the movement that they do is completely mirrored, is synchronized, because this can then result to an illusion. We just heard a little bit about it, the illusion of body ownership. So this feeling that this is really your body, although you know it's not. And this is some example we also already had, but I will nevertheless talk briefly about it because this is the best known example for body ownership illusion. It's a rubber hand illusion. A participant places a hand on a table, and then one hand, in this case here, the right hand gets covered by this wall, so that it's not visible, but instead next to it there's a rubber hand that's visible, and then a second person comes from the other side of the table and strokes both hands synchronously with, for example, brushes. And what we then, the situation that we create is essentially the participant looks at the rubber hand and can see how the stroking is done. And at the same time, synchronously, they cannot see, but they can feel that their own hand is stroked. So, and then there's a logical conclusion that maybe both is the same. Maybe it's my hand. And this is something you can measure, for example, by posing a thread to the hand. So like coming with a needle and pretending you want to stick it in it, then the heart rate will increase, or people will start to sweat and respond to it like it is, like it was the real hand. Another way of measuring it is what you can see here. So you need to, here the participant wouldn't be able to see the hand, and then neither the rubber hand nor the real hand, and then they are asked to just point, where do you see your hand? And like here, this is quite accurate, I would say. But after inducing the illusion, participants or people tend to drift towards the rubber hand. So instead of pointing here, it's something here in the middle to correct for this mismatch between felt and seen hand location. And coming back quickly to this virtual embodiment scenario, one big advantage of VR is that we can easily replace the entire body and not just a rubber hand. This is with this non-VR setups quite difficult, and we don't need a second person. We just need a tracking system, and what's important that our movements are really without latency and completely synchronous translated onto the avatar. But then it's quite easy to induce this illusion. And there are quite a few studies in the last years have been published about positive effects of virtual embodiment and body ownership. For example, a study by Seinfeld and colleagues where they convicted offenders took part and they switched the roles, and the offenders embodied a female body, and then they were offended by someone else. And this has shown that it increases the empathy and also the capability to recognize emotions, especially negative emotions in female faces. Another study similar is about harassment. There was men were embodied also again in a female body sitting at a bar, and then they were sexually harassed by a virtual character. And men who were in this condition were later showed less harassment towards women than men in a control condition. And quite a lot of studies are about racial biases, and these studies show that virtual reality and virtual embodiment can reduce implicit racial biases. And implicit racial biases are biases that we are not consciously aware of, and it's something that we all have. We all favor our own groups, and out groups are always a bit more suspicious, let's say. And here, these studies, white people were embodied in black avatars. And this has shown that afterwards, having this experience, when you test the implicit racial bias before and after the VR experience, that they got reduced. So just by having a virtual body, like in the study by Peck and colleagues, here the last one, there was really just a participant were standing in front of a mirror for 12 minutes. There was no task, nothing. And this also seems to be lasting effects, like the study by Banaku and colleagues from 2016. They repeated after the VR session 1 week later and tested again these implicit racial biases, and they were still lower than before the VR session. But the question is, of course, how is this possible? Just because I have visibly a different body for a few minutes, and this changes how I see this group of people, so to say. I forgot one thing. This also has been shown in the rubber hand illusion. So when you use a black rubber hand, you can observe the same effect, and implicit racial biases go down. Yeah, but then I get to the question, how is this possible? And there's first of all, we need to think of this concept before I explain you or give you an explanation from one theory behind it. So first of all, we understand bodily resonance, and I think it's a pretty easy concept. So when we observe bodily states in others, then they can trigger the same states in us. Like when we see someone suffering from pain, this can feel painful for us as well. Or someone needs to yawn and we start to yawn, and this is essentially bodily resonance. And this is taken as evidence that I get triggered this bodily states by observing them from others, that there are shared representations of our own body and of other bodies, so they can partially overlap. And this is thought to build the fundamental of empathy or compassion, that we basically identify us a bit with others and see and really can see what's going on in them. Interestingly, this is also something that is dependent on in-group, out-group effects. So people of your own group, your own race, or own football team are always something you see more positive than out-group members. You're better in seeing the bodily state, sorry. But now to come to the explanation why this all might lead to reduced implicit racial biases. There is a paper by Meister and colleagues, and they have basically 3 steps that they describe. So the first step is the physical domain association. From the embodiment, because it's our own body, suddenly this virtual body, we perceive it as being more similar to our own body. And that can then activate the self-concept. And our self-concept is usually we see ourselves more positive than others. So all the others are idiots. I'm always don't make mistakes and so on. And this can then be linked, so this positive self-association with this physical association of like the black skin. And then this can be generalized to the completely to the outgroup, and we perceive the outgroup later as being more similar than ourselves as before. But yeah, like with every technology, when you can use something for the good, you can also use it for the bad. And when we can reduce implicit racial biases, then we probably can also increase it. And actually, the first study on this by Groom and colleagues, they found exactly that. They embodied people in a black avatar, and then they put them in a virtual job interview. And one important difference why they might, one idea why they possibly found different results than the other studies is the situation that happened here. So it was a job interview, like I said, in Peck et al., it was just standing in front of a mirror. In another study, it was a Tai Chi session. On the other hand, a virtual job interview is a quite stressful situation, especially it's a situation that it's about us. So when I apply for a job, I want to make a good impression, and I'm the one who gets rated. And then it's also that job interviews are something that are often already biased against black people. And that maybe this combination led to the increase of racial biases in this case. Or in other words, that maybe the context matters here in which direction the effect goes. And this was tested by Barnaco and colleagues. And you can also see it here, this is a screenshot from that, and they placed participants in the street, again, in a black avatar, and there were people walking by, and then these people could be either positive, so they looked at you, they smiled at you, or they could be just neutral, so they just did their thing and ignored you, or they could be negative. So it was really that they completely avoided eye contact, they tried to avoid you with great distances and so on. So that there's really a negative effect about you that you experience in the situation. And here, with this negative context, they also observed an increase in racial biases. On the other hand, in the neutral and on the positive condition, it was the other way around again. It got lower. So this really seems to be a problem of context. And yeah, the idea here is why it got lower. So as I just said, so negative effect can also negative effect can also lower cognitive capability. So we when we are stressed and everything, our memory is worse and attention span. And this might also in the study have had the result that no new associations were formed because we were just cognitive, there was an overload, so to say. And then it's also that negative effect itself leads to higher biases. So when we are in a bad mood, we tend in these tests to have higher scores than when we are happy. Yeah, maybe then this together with this, what I already said, with this negative association or this negative feedback from the crowd, that might then reinforce also maybe existing implicit associations between black and negative attributes. But what all of this shows is we don't really understand what's going on here right now. So few studies show, okay, it can be used in a positive way. They'll show people get more racist. But in the end, it says we need more research on this. But of course, it would be problematic if we would now go on and on and on and always make studies involving black avatars and trying to increase racial biases against black people. So I at least would not feel comfortable doing that when I think that I make people a little bit more racist. So yeah, we try to again in the study increase racial biases, but the idea is to use a fictional group. So basically like a model organism in biology. So a group that does not exist, there is no person on this planet that represents this group. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I unfortunately cannot really go into details. This is all what I talk about today is ongoing research. So it's really just teasers, what we are doing, but I think you might get an idea at least. So, and what I just said, we use a fictional group. So, of course, this is to avoid potential carryover effects. But and we can do research without biases, but also it would give us more freedom what we can do in experiments, because we don't need to worry that it might be too unethical or too bad, because there is no victim, so to say. But then there's also one thing: what is if we now find that we are like playing a computer game with a black character might make you a bit more racist? Because how to deal with that? This is, I think, pretty hard to regulate. And so another aspect of the study will be that we want to test another way to mitigate these effects. And this is based on the concept of psychological distance. This comes from construal level theory, and there's a perceived distance to objects or events which are not currently present in our perception. The theory says that greater psychological distance, so greater felt distance, the more abstract our memories or our descriptions are. And this is something you can see in the language. So like an event that was close, or feels close, could be described like we went to club X, Y, and when it's more distal, then it's just we went out. So it doesn't matter which club it was. Instead, it focuses on the overall picture and on the important points. So these less important things get deleted. And our idea is, so we have an idea how we might, in the end of the VR experience, be able to increase the psychological distance to what people just experience. And we want to test if this maybe, make it clearer for participants that this was a distant and a separate reality what they experienced. And we believe that this might, counter these effects. But I so far talked about the illusion of body ownership, but usually in VR it's said that there are at least 4 unique illusions that we can experience, which are hard or not possible to experience in the same way without. And 2 of these other illusions are summarized under the term presence, which is traditionally defined as the feeling of being there. So you put on the headset and you really have the feeling like being in this virtual place. Newer definitions split this up in 2 separate illusions, and the first illusion is the place illusion, which describes the sensation or the illusion of being in this virtual place while being aware that it's not real. So it feels real, but it's not real. And the place illusion is more or less what before was called presence. So it's essentially just this add-on that we know it's not real in the definition. But there's another illusion that comes into play, this plausibility illusion. The plausibility illusion is there's this experience that you experience some event happening around you, and you really have the feeling this is really happening. So you feel at that place, and things around feel like they are really happening, which means you feel like you're part of this. You're really there. And when both of these illusions, which are more or less independent of each other, when both occur, then it's then it's what we call presence. And presence then means the participant will behave as if the situation was real. Okay, but like with body ownership, there might be also problems that come with presence and with virtual reality, which feels extremely real. One thing is that has often been discussed is that it might lead to depersonalization or derealization of the order, like with personalization, with derealization, for example, it's a bit like inverted presence. So because the reality does not feel as real as patients were used to, but they know it's real. So it's a bit like the opposite. And it has been discussed that VR might be able to induce symptoms like these. And there is actually a quite recent study where they tested this, and participants were playing Skyrim, an open world computer game, which you can play both on a desktop computer as well as in VR. And they then tested before and afterwards this scores for these disorders, and they found in both conditions that the symptoms increased. However, in VR it was more pronounced, so it seems to be that VR is indeed more effective here, so to say. Another potential issue which is related to presence is that it might be potentially inducing PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. this is especially interesting or plausible because virtuality is already used for quite a while to treat post-traumatic stress disorders. And then again, when we can use it for the good, then probably we can use it for the opposite. And another aspect that's related to present is that it might be really blur the distinction between what is real and what is virtual. And here it's not so much about the concern that in the moment when you are in VR that you forget about it. Usually, I mean, with current technology, you feel it in your face every moment. But even when you consider we have better technology where you don't recognize it, when you're wearing a device, you will remember that you put on a device, enter the virtual world. So the concern is here more about that when you think of some past experience and then you are not able to differentiate was this real happening or was this virtual. So one problem could be, for example, someone performs a sport like skateboarding and then they play a skateboarding game in VR where you can jump higher, be faster, and so on. And the next time they're standing on a real skateboard, they are overestimating their skills and then fall and so on. Another thing that could happen is also similar to what I talked before already. It might also play into developing prejudices or biases against other groups. So, like you might have a negative encounter with a person from another race, like a black person who is rude, or like avatar who is rude in VR. And I mean, although it's already stupid to generalize from one experience or to a group, this is actually what happens. People have one bad experience with someone from another group and they think the whole group is like that. But in VR, it's actually that we don't even know if the person was really black who controls that avatar. Or in these days with AI, it's not even, we even need to think of the possibility that this is just an AI controlling the avatar. And the only study so far that looked into this, or that I found at least, was a study from 2009 where children were tested and they did swim virtually with whales, and there was a control condition where I think a story was read about swimming with whales and then imagine it. And then 1 or 2 weeks later, they tested talked to the children and tested if the children think this was virtual, that was just fictional, or it was real. And they found in both groups children who later reported this as being really happening, but it was more often in VR. So at least with children, it seems to be VR seems to be effective to create false memories. And here it's also that we are currently working on a study, and conference is not really there, but they're okay. But the approach is the idea is to bring the virtual and the real a little bit closer together. So this is the visitors room in our lab. Also when we have guests there, but also when we have meetings there. And this is a virtual recreation of it. And we want to see when people first are in VR and then in another session are in reality, if this might affect their behavior afterwards. So do they confuse what was real and what was virtual? And here again, we want to test if psychological distancing, what I just described, if this also might be able to make it clearer that this was a virtual experience and not a real one. And then I come to the last illusion that is associated with VR. This is called co-presence. And this is the illusion of being in the same space with others together and being able to interact with other people in VR. This is essentially a bit the summary, but it depends on the other illusions that I just presented. So we need the place illusion to share a place with others, of course, and then we need also the plausibility illusion that we really everything feels real as also the interactions feel real, and we really have the impression that we're talking to a real person. And of course, we need embodiment. As I said before, without seeing someone whenever one is invisible, this makes it hard for interactions. And here we have also one study. This is really just, we have not really worked on this, it's just a theoretical idea, but we'll work on this someday. Yeah, well, first the problems that are associated. So like in with co-present in VR, people might maybe not have the same feeling for boundaries for personal space, and they ignore in the moment that maybe the person they are, where they invade personal space, has really a strong co-presence illusion. So they really feel the other person is there, and then yeah, they enter the personal space, although they shouldn't. I mean, in VR, you have also your personal space. It feels strange when people come too close to you, something you don't know from normal computer games. And the same is also with bullying and harassment. People might have lower inhibitions to bully or harass people because they think that's not real. But for the person who gets bullied, this experience might be real or is real. So there are discussions about, David Chalmers will talk tomorrow about it, I think, whether virtual worlds are real or not. But what is important here, the experience that you have is real. When you feel erased, it doesn't matter if you're in a virtual space or in a real space, you feel erased. So be nice when you're in virtual worlds. People also have their feelings. One more other problem is that it could be used to create false identities. So I could just take an avatar from someone else and pretend to be that person. Or consider you meet your friend, someone who looks like your friend, and they aren't, and they're not just looking like your friend. Okay, the sound does not work. Unfortunately, there was actually a voice clone of myself saying that it might not just look like your friend, but also sound like it. Because in these days, it's not difficult to clone a voice with just a few minutes of audio. But everyone who wants to hear the voice clone, come later to me and I can show it to you. So and here we also have a study plan, and yeah, the idea is to keep the visual cues and the auditory cues the same. So the avatars people will interact with will not change, but the person controlling it. And we want to do this to examine really this subtle cues, so body language, and what kind of cues do we use to maybe tell the difference between who is a real friend or who is a fake friend or fake identity. And with that being said, I'm already on my last slide. So virtual reality has been demonstrated that it can be used for the good, that can increase empathy and compassion and pro-social behavior. But like with every technology, VR can be also misused in a negative way. And these challenges raise significant ethical concerns that we need to address and where we need to find ways to research it. As I said before, this is often because you study unethical things, and maybe you have to do the unethical thing to study it. And we need to find ways how we can do this research without being unethical. And yeah, right now it's really, there are a lot of studies looking how to use VR for good, but almost nothing for the opposite. And the good news is we are working on at least a few of these questions. I mean, there are many, many more, but maybe that's a start. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and questions or later.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I mean, it's mind-blowing to see that in VR, we're not just changing the space, but we can also change who we are, and then we are interacting with people who may be pretending to be someone different. I mean, it's just blew my mind. So next, our next speaker, is he, so, okay, right. So our next speaker, Mark Billinghurst.